Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're taking on a project of epic proportion. I'm going to be completely rebuilding my shrimp room from the ground up. We're going to be replacing everything from the electrical wiring to the beams to the air system. Plus, we're doing all of this without taking the shrimp out of their tanks. To add to the challenge, we're also under a time crunch because I have more shrimp arriving soon and we need to get everything done before they do. So obviously I've got a lot of work ahead of me. I'll explain everything as we get through the video, but I'm going to jump straight into it. Okay, so while that was quick work, the real job starts now where we're going to take the tanks down. I figured now would be a good time just to give you a brief overview of what I'm actually doing. The beams that I bought originally to house the tanks are 2.6 meters in length and they're rated for about 900 kgs. The problem with this is that although that they can take the weight, they ended up starting to bow. And basically what that means is I can't put the tanks right next to each other, otherwise they would end up pressing against each other and crack and break. The idea today is to upgrade these beams to 2-ton beams and bring them down to 2.4 meters. Also, after running the room for a couple of months, I now know what I need and don't. So we're going to be optimizing the air system as well to save quite a lot of space, essentially allowing us to move the RO system entirely to the Carradina side. Not only will that be super efficient, but it will also allow us to install a whole new rack of tanks on this side of the room. I kind of have a moment to catch you guys up because I really need to catch my breath. It's actually kind of hurtful how easy the time-lapse makes it look, but that was a really big job just moving the tanks off the rack. Now that we're at this point, we're actually going to be able to start taking apart the rack itself and then bringing in our new beams and shifting everything around and getting its final place. Once the beams are in, we can work on the airline. I'm super excited to do that because, you know, in hindsight, I kind of knew how I set it up. Just look at the amount of airline that I'm going to be getting rid of. Okay, so well, as easy as the time-lapse makes it look, I wish it was. I really am like panting and trying to catch my breath after putting this together. I'm very happy with the results so far. This is exactly what I was planning to do. Essentially, we'll have 4 different racks to put the tanks on now, which allows me to have essentially a whole extra shelf full of tanks. Plus, with the additional weight capabilities, we're able to put the tanks closer together, allowing me to add another tank on each of the racks compared to the previous setup. Now that I'm sufficiently tired, I'm going to go ahead and start on the airline for this side of the room. Once that's plumbed up, we'll do electrical. Then I can move all of the Carradina tanks onto this side just for space because our lounge is currently packed with tanks and I can't take more of them out of the room. Once we've moved them over, we'll start with this rack and repeat the process all over again. Cool guys, so we're pretty much, I would assume, halfway there as far as like my planning for the project is gone. All the electrics are wired up. This rack is essentially ready to go. It kind of just needs to be put together and the tanks transferred over, and then I need to install the lights. However, because we can't actually start with this rack until the tanks are off and I'm out of space, I'm going to run a temporary power line to this just so we can get some lights hooked up, and then I'm going to be able to put the pumps on this side of the rack. Essentially, you can see here, I've basically just put some emergency pumps on just so that they have air during this whole transition phase. Because obviously these are my most expensive tanks. I want to make sure that nothing goes wrong with them. And then we can probably start taking this rack apart today still. The idea behind that is that as soon as I set up the RO bins, we can actually start producing RO water, so that by the time I'm done with this and these tanks go back onto the Carradina side, I'll have some water that's already been mixed and bubbled so that I can fill the tanks back up. So cool, crossing fingers that nothing goes wrong. I'm gonna slowly start pulling this rack apart and then moving the tanks across. And yeah, let's see how far we get today. All the tanks have been moved. That took a lot longer than I expected it to, because obviously I had to drain one tank at a time and then refill it once it was on the second rack. So I didn't even bother recording that. However, it's gotten quite late. It's already 8 o'clock and it's kind of crunch time for me. Thankfully, the last of the beams arrived just in time. So I'm gonna go ahead and hustle and just get this rack done so that we can get the RO system hooked up temporarily, just so that I can start making RO water for when we put the tanks back tomorrow. Okay guys, so it is the next day. It is a beautiful day. There's not a breath of wind in the air, so I'm really excited to wrap up the rest of the project. I think before we get started, I just want to catch you up on what happened last night, because I didn't end up filming it. I started struggling with some of the screws, and it was pretty much just more of the same thing than what we did on this side of the room. So essentially last night I got all the electrics hooked up on this side of the room. We've got the airline plumbed in, and all we need to do now is connect it right at the top of the room across, and then we'll tee our pump in. However, the reason I didn't get the RO running last night is because I only realized then that these shelving boards, or cross beam boards, whatever you want to call them, these need to be cut. And unfortunately last night, this took me quite a while to do. It looks fast on the time lapse, but it was about 10:30 when I wrapped this rack up. So unfortunately I wasn't able to use the jigsaw to cut these, but that's what we're going to do today. Other than that, I can say that I'm very, very happy with the current setup. I know it's very janky and very, sort of half-assed and put together, but I'm very happy with this because I've noticed that the shrimp are looking really good. I haven't seen any stress molts or anything like that. No dropped eggs on the buried females. So I'm a lot less stressed about keeping these guys here for a little bit longer. So we're not really going to try and rush as much as what I was yesterday. I'm going to just do things methodically and try and do them properly from the get-go. So we're going to run to the shop quickly. I need to get some bracing. I'm basically going to use steel bracing to brace the lights. Other than that, I'm going to grab some jigsaw blades, and then we're going to go ahead. I think that's the first big job that I want to do, is I want to chop all these boards so that we can get them fitted and slowly start moving the tanks over. Okay, so for a very quick look, you obviously know that I've put the electrical boxes in and I've actually started wiring up the lights. So now you can see, let me just stop down here. You can see this grid mesh that I've put in here. It's basically like a steel cable. or steel bracing, if you want to call it that. And that's going to make sure that the lights never come down. I know it looks a little bit janky, but it's definitely improvement over the previous clips that I had, which actually I managed to repurpose. I don't know if you can see in there, I've managed to run a line over here by cutting these clips in half, and they fit perfectly on this electrical wiring. So what I've got over here is one extra plug that's obviously not plugged in right now, because that's going to be our untimed power that I'm going to run to this side. I realized that obviously I'm going to need to run the dehumidifier from this side, and I'm going to need to have some heaters for the fish and, you know, certain things like that. So it just makes sense to have at least one untimed plug over there that I can run those peripheral items from. And this is the neatest and easiest way that I could think of doing it. Other than that, I'm just using these little you know, nail-in clips to just keep all the wiring nice and secure, nice and tight. And obviously all of these loose wires need to go, but that's pretty much what it's going to look like. You know, small wire coming out into the box to power the box, going out, and then obviously looping to the next box. And then the lights will just wrap around here and plug straight in. That way I can also control, you know, if we're running certain tanks or if we need to do a blackout or whatever the case. It gives me a lot of flexibility, and it looks just so much neater. If you're an electrician and you want to bash me in the comments, go ahead. I know it's not the most amazing job, but it's definitely an improvement over what I've done before. Well guys, we're finally at that point where it is time to start moving tanks. It's 9 o'clock again, so it's been a absolutely packed day, but we've got a ton done, and I'm really excited to say that I only had that one leak when we tested the airline, so everything's just sort of been going my way, like touch wood, because I was waiting for something to go wrong. But as far as I'm concerned, this rack is complete. Like, all the RO systems are in. Obviously we'll put one more box once I get that, but all the electrical is done. The constant live and the timed live is done. The lights are all in, they're in like permanently. And yeah, the only other thing that I need to do is there's one more piece of the rack that needs to go in here. However, that one, I've already cut it, but it just needs to be painted. So I'll probably do that tomorrow sometime. I don't need all of the rack space immediately. I just need some of it so that we can get all the tanks back in and then obviously get moving. So I'm gonna stop filming for now, like just talking to you guys, and I'm just gonna get the work done, because there is a ton to be done tonight still. And then I'll catch up with you guys again tomorrow, which is gonna be day 3 for the project, but hopefully, if I can keep up this pace, the last day, and we'll be able to wrap up this construction entirely. Well guys, it is officially day 3 of the project, and I'm starting to feel the effects of all the long hours and all the heavy lifting, but we are nearing the end. So just a quick look at what we've got going on here in terms of the airline system. I've managed to do the very first rack of tanks. So these are all Carabiner tanks. And it's the first look at what it's gonna look like once the entire rack is populated. So we've got 7 tanks with very little room left over. So we're actually maximizing the amount of space on this rack. And then obviously for the airline, we've got direct plumbing right there, so that's a much shorter airline. I'm actually kind of embarrassed to show you guys like just how much airline I've managed to save. This is how much inefficiency just on these 7 tanks, by the way. So not on all 40 that I've got, that's literally just these 7. So we've saved a ton of airline and it's working really well. You'll actually notice that these tanks are a bit fuller. I've been making some manual RO mixing for now. That's actually the mishap that I had. So one of my totes, I've upgraded them to have these sort of fittings rather than just having the pipe running in there, but this one started leaking. The rest of them have been fine so far, but I've actually started draining them because I'm just going to upgrade. Instead of using an O-ring, I'm going to be using these sort of rubber washers just to give them a bit more of a seal and allowing me to tighten it a bit more, because I like to have things like quite tightened, and I think that's what went wrong with this one. I over tightened and that's what caused it to leak. However, that's been working really well. The airline is actually working super well, because as you'll notice, some of these tanks have actually got some air coming through them, and the reason for that is because I just wanted to test the pressure of the system from a low pressure perspective. It's very easy to plug in that pump and quickly find a leak, but to see if we'd actually be able to power the tanks on some small pumps just overnight, I plugged in these two baby ones over here, and I just sort of reverse engineered them into the pipe over there. And as a result, you can see none of that air is being wasted. We're actually managing to pump some filtration through the tanks over here. So the job for now is obviously just to clean this rack up nicely and get all of the wood installed. Some of these wood pieces I still need to cut, and then some of them I need to paint, those over there. So I'm very happy with that. That's going to go really quickly. We need to install the light fixtures, but that's just, 4 bolts per light. Very, very quick as well. The top rack is essentially done, so I'm going to use that to store all the empty tanks for now. Once this rack is cleaned up properly, we'll actually start bringing the tanks from inside the house back into the shrimp room, and I'm very excited to get started with that. So let's get to it. Guys, the tanks are finally in. I've even put in my filming light, so we're back in business. It's looking a bit worse for wear, obviously, because the tanks are still drained. As they fill from the top down, I'm going to be working at getting all the holes drilled and the lines plumbed and cutting all the air lines shorter, putting those new fittings in and getting everything ready for a final sort of grand finale switch on of the pump and having everything running back on the system that it originally was. Here's crossing fingers that nothing goes wrong. Let's get to it. Well guys, we've finally gotten to that point. I'm absolutely smashed, I'm dead tired, but it's been a lot of hard work to get to this point. We can finally switch on our air pump and test our air system hooked up to the tanks to see the tanks coming to life. It's actually quite an exciting moment because I'm literally going to plug this thing in, all the tanks are going to jump to life. I do want to just make mention, if you hear a hissing sound, there is one vent hole just in case, because I know that there's a lot less air that's actually hooked up on this system than what there was previously. I still need to run all the air for the RO tubes, and then obviously I need to get more tanks and hook them up. So I'm more concerned about just switching it on, having the tanks all on air, having all the filters running so that I can go and sleep easy and know that the shrimp are going to be safe. Well guys, there you have it. I think needless to say, it's worked out really well. There's obviously still a ton of work to do. I've got like a week's worth of cleaning and repacking to do to get all of the stock and everything else that I have that was originally in the room back into the room. However, I am going to cut the video here because I'm absolutely smashed and I'm going to take a day off just to recover from all the long hours that have been put into this. I think the next video that I do though, I'm going to break down a little bit more in detail just around the RO system and the water filtration, basically how I'm topping up all the tanks and stuff like that. And then we'll also cover all the other like little things that need to be done, like painting the beams and figuring out where the dehumidifier is going to go. And there's a couple of other things that I want to try and like figure out where I'm going to put tanks and where I'm going to make storage space. But I think this has been a pretty successful, pretty productive video, but I will do a sort of final finale vlog where we just finish everything else up, and then I'll be able to answer any questions that you guys might have in this video. That being said, if you do have any questions, make sure you leave a comment down below. Ask me anything. I'm not a professional. I'm not an electrician by any means. Everything was done through sort of Googling and YouTubing and figuring it out myself. However, if you have any questions for me, I'd be very happy to answer them. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like, show some love, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. If you have, you're awesome. Continue being awesome, and I'll see you guys in the next video.